Welcome to LSC, it's Sportstime. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today we're celebrating our 100th show, and with me is Wube Gabre, and Wube and I go way back to, was it 2010?
2010, yes sir.
We're going to talk a little bit about our crew and about some of the guests we had, but I want you to tell the fans, and I hope we got some fans out there,
yeah, I hope so,
about how we met and how this thing got started.
Well, we met in the director Scotty Bauer's office in 2010, in August 2010. Just happened to see you in his office, and he said, "Hey, you're Mr. Bob Hintz. Would love to do some work with you," and then the rest was history.
So, and we just got to thinking, we both were thinking about the same thing, about doing a show where we could look at some of the people who have gone through the Hampton system and had gone on to either great in their professional life or in ball. So,
well, that's the great thing. I mean, everybody wants to see themselves on TV, and then to have yourself on TV and to revisit it again, I just thought it'd be a great opportunity to get people back in here to talk about their high school accomplishments, college, and even some pro. And to have a show that does that was just a great experience and great opportunity.
Oh, we've had some, we're going to talk about that, but we want to talk a little bit about our crew. Let's first talk about Doug. Little Doug, sitting over here to my right.
He's been into 34 countries. He's been in the business for over 40 years. And he's a good person to learn a lot from. He's a good photographer and an editor and everything.
Yeah, well, I've been able to go with him, do a couple things. The last one we did, we went up to Kecoughtan when they retired Howard White's number and got to talk to him a little bit, but Doug did a great job on that. And then we got Lloyd. Lloyd was with you over here.
Yeah, one thing about Doug also, he played for Coach Mike Smith, since we're on the Sportstime
wow,
team.
That's right.
Yeah, he was on one of Mike Smith's first teams.
So he was part of that 400 wins and all that.
He can take some credit to that, I guess, right? He was on the one of Coach Mike Smith's teams, so he should feel really proud about playing for Coach Smith back then.
Well, and let's make sure everybody understands that you guys were with the school system channel. You were over here doing the Hampton City Council. And that's where you came from, and that's where Lloyd came from.
Yeah, I worked with the city for 3 years before we merged, and we weren't doing any sports, obviously, with the city. And then we merged together with Hampton in the school system, and then that's where I was being part of LSC.
Talk a little bit about Lloyd, because he came with you
from that
group.
Lloyd's from D.C. He's a huge Redskin fan. He also came over from the city, and he's been doing this for 25 years. He's been in the business for 25 years. And he also does a lot of the shooting and does a lot of things behind the scenes as well.
And that's what people have to understand, that I get to sit out here, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes I don't get to see. Krista Campbell, she came in new this year or last year, I'm sorry.
She did. She's new to us, but not new to the business.
Right.
She's from Baltimore, obviously.
And that's where you're from.
From Baltimore, Maryland. Got to put a plug in for the 410, as we call it up there. But she actually came from Chesapeake. And did the same thing she's doing now. She's a writer, editor, helps with the cameras as well. Okay. So
and then we got a guy that's on the jib. He's my buddy.
The graphics guru.
He
Andy
is the
Foley.
guy.
He's from Newport News, Menchfield grad. He does all our graphics, and he hooks us up with the great jib shots for the show. So.
And what's neat about that is we can sit there and he can come in from the top or from the bottom or from the side and does a lot of things. And then we got an engineer and audio is Greg Lesko.
Greg Lesko, he's been in the business for a long time as well. He's from Pittsburgh, huge Steeler fan. And he does a lot of our audio and everything behind the scenes as far as the engineering for the show as well.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit about you before I talk about Scotty, because Wube means first son.
First son.
And what do I call you?
Number one son.
Number one son.
Yeah. I grew up in Baltimore, like I said before. I played sports growing up, basketball, soccer, baseball. I was actually a tidbit nobody knows about. I was an all-state soccer player growing up.
Wow.
Nobody probably knew that. But I played varsity soccer and varsity basketball in high school, and graduated from ODU in '99. And just wanted to get into sports somehow, and LSC provided that for me, and I'm just pretty excited.
I'm going to give you a little tidbit that you may not know.
What's that?
But you've heard of Earl the Pearl Monroe.
Played for the Baltimore Bullets.
Right.
Yep.
He was an all-American soccer player in high school.
I read about him, yep.
A lot of people don't know that, but you know, that foot, you got to have the ability to use your feet playing defense or offense or whatever.
I heard about that. Yeah,
so,
pretty good.
Yeah, so you did the same thing.
I tried to. I didn't have the kind of career he did. I wish I did, but you know. So can't always get it that way.
Let's talk about the big guy, Scotty Bowers. He's been forever.
Oh, he's the man. Anytime you turn on a game or a show that we've had, he's affiliated with it in some way or form. 28 years as working with Channel. You know better than me. 29, 5, 46, and 48. 46. I think Scotty's been here for all
of them.
So he's the man in charge.
We're going to talk a little bit about how we got started. First group we got in, I got Beth Mayer in, who was in charge of all the athletic directors in the city, and then we got the 4 ADs in.
Right.
But then we got Bud Porter. Now, a lot of people in Hampton know Bud Porter, but he was a very good football player in Hampton, went to William Mary, played football, was very big in Fox Hill, fast pitch, very big in the Peninsula Sports Club, and was instrumental in getting the Lower Athletic Hall of Fame started.
Right.
So that was a good guy to start with because he had a lot of things, and a lot of people said, well, how did you do with Bud?
Right.
I said, I told him, we're going to talk those 5 things.
Yeah, well, you ask him one question, he can go on a whole hour.
Right.
But he was actually, you're right, he was a great person to start out with. And with the ADs, they kind of helped us branch out, because once we got to them, they gave us all the coaches' numbers and players that we can get in touch with. So it was a great way to start out with the 4 ADs and, of course, Bud Porter.
Right. And then we end up getting 2 coaches down. The first one, Mike London, head coach at UVA.
Yeah,
Wow.
That was a great guest to start out with as well. I mean, Hampton guy, went to Bethel. Played for Bethel, played for Coach Kaz, and he's down at Virginia doing great things.
And I love
down
what
there.
he said. And I said, well, how did you get to Bethel? Because you was at Tab. And he said, well, Kaz recruited. Oh, my bad, Kaz.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was one of our highlights of the show. That was great. I mean, everybody got a laugh out of that one. So.
Right. And then, of course, Kurt Newsom, very big at Kecoughtan and Heritage.
And he went to JMU after that, and now he's at Virginia Tech. I'm not sure if he still recruits. Is the lead
He's
recruiter
doing some recruiting, but he's not the main recruiter anymore down there. But I think he should be. But that's my.
Well, just in the 757 area, that's why he was a great guest. I mean,
right.
He's always down here. His family's still here, and he recruits this area really, really hard, and he's from here, so we had to put him on.
He said when he comes here, he gets a home meal from Mama. That's a good reason.
That's a good reason to come home, right? Yeah.
All right, now we had I thought, a pretty special guest in Phil Smith. Now, a lot of people have seen the movie Remember the Titans. Right. They call him the first black head coach in the VHSL. Not true.
Well, the interesting story about that, and when we were interviewing him, I thought it was really neat that he was actually what the movie was about.
Right.
Or he was Denzel. But once Hollywood got involved and they kind of got the backstory of it, that he didn't play a varsity schedule, which he still was the first black coach to coach in the state of Virginia. Yeah. That they didn't really take on to that story. They went to the T.C. Williams coaches and took that story, but. Really, he was the guy, and a lot of people don't understand that Phoebus was really the first team to do what T.C. Williams initially thought they did. So.
Right. Then we had Walter Brower in.
Yeah.
And I'm skipping over some people.
Right, absolutely.
But Walter, here's a guy who's been at Hampton for 30-some years, over 500 wins.
I mean, he kind of like just something at Hampton. I mean, the coaches stick around and the players love to play for him. 500 wins. I mean, you know how many great players he's had along the way. He has a great player now in the Barber kid. But I mean, just the work ethic he puts for his kids and the experience and the longevity that he's been at Hampton is just amazing.
Right. And what he told me is when he first got the job, he had to convince the kids to play 2 sports.
To stay in shape.
And once they did, and they found out that they were very successful. He didn't have any problem getting the kids to come out, play football, and also play basketball. But I thought one of the best games I ever saw was when Kevin Swan was a captain. Of course, Eric Hunter kind of run the team, but they went up and played South Lakes.
Yeah,
in the semifinals. Grant Hill was on that team. We went down, had a huge 4 years at Duke, and then he's still playing in the NBA.
Well, we've had a few guests come in and talk about that game, and Eric Hunter in particular. But I'll never forget when Gannon Baker came in. He ran a camp for Grant Hill.
Right.
And Grant Hill says, "Man, I still think about that game." He says, "Man, that Hunter kid was crazy." He says, "Man, he's still crazy." So people still talk about that game. I think that's what's so unique about LSC is. We still show those games on TV, and people can still talk about it. And from Gannon Baker to Grant Hill, they all still talk about
what happened
back then.
That was in
I think it was 89,
88 or 89,
yeah.
89, yeah.
They played at University of Richmond, I believe.
Right.
So, yeah.
And it was a great game. We really enjoyed doing it. Tim and I didn't realize how good Grant Hill was going to be, but
you could see it. I mean, he was 6'7", 6'8", all over
well, he
the
had
field.
20 points first half, and Eric says, "Let me guard him the second half."
Yeah, exactly. And you saw what happened after that. A couple elbows, and he wasn't the same. Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about two guys that graduated from Hampton High years apart. And I'm not sure how many years apart. It has to be 7, 8, maybe even 10 years apart.
Right.
First is Myron Newsom. Right. Myron played at Hampton, then went to junior college.
Right.
And then back and played at TAC. And here this guy is wants to play ball so bad, and he wants to play pro, ends up going over and playing in the Europe League in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. Who was his quarterback?
Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner.
Yep.
You know, that was great. And then 10 years later, along comes Elton Brown. And now Elton plays for Hampton High, offensive lineman, 4 years at Virginia, gets drafted and goes to Cardinals. Who's his quarterback?
Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner.
I mean, it's amazing
how does that work?
Amazing how the stories turn out. Another story is Marcus Higgins, who also went to Virginia, is Myron Newsom's cousin. And another thing about that is David Wofford, who's a quarterback at Virginia now, is Marcus Higgins and Myron Newsom's cousin. So the stories around in this area are so deep. But going back to your point about Kurt Warner, you know, same high school, a few years apart, and end up playing together against a Hall of Fame quarterback.
We also want to talk a little bit about Charlie Brown. When he came in here, we talked about him a little bit, and his son, Milan, who got the head job at Holy Cross. Now, what's really neat about that, he calls and he tells me, he says, "You ain't gonna believe who I got on my speed dial." I said, "Well, who could you have?" Bob Cousy, Tommy Heisman, both in the NBA Hall of Fame. Great. Now, he also has a great story, and I want you to tell that story.
Well, speaking of speed dial, Chris Slade, who played at TAB from the 757, also called Milan Brown and said, "Listen, I heard you were new to the area. Congratulations on your new job in the Boston area at Holy Cross. How would you like 2 tickets to a Red Sox game?" Out of nowhere. They didn't.
Had never met.
Never met. Just knew he was from here. I mean, they heard about each other, obviously, from the area.
Right.
But just 2 tickets. Hey, go to the game. Just welcome to Boston.
Welcome to Boston.
So you know what he says after that? Can we go to a Patriots game? So then a few months, once football season came back around, he said, "Of course. You know, welcome to the area. They're going to a Patriots game on Chris Slade's expense," and it was a great feeling for him.
And that's just awesome. And then, still talking about Milan, Kevin Swan, who played with Hampton and won state championship, is now preacher at Ivy Baptist Church. Right. Introduces him to a young lady, and they get engaged. And so Milan says, "Guess what? You got to marry."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's again, the 757. Everybody just kind of sticks together, and that's what makes this area so unique.
And the 757 this area is unbelievable. And I get a call from Bobby up in Minnesota, and he said, "Dad, are you watching a game?" And I said, "Which one?" He said, "The one Missouri's playing. They got a kid from Kickintown." I said, "Yeah, Ricardo Ratcliffe." And he says, "But that's not the thing. They're talking about 757 area, the recruiting area."
I mean, it's a hotbed. I mean, like I said before to somebody else, if there's 3 games on TV, you're guaranteed to at least have one 757 player somewhere on one of those games. Football, baseball, basketball, it doesn't matter. This area is loaded. So
let's talk a little bit about Wayne Gomes.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good story. Talk a little bit about the story, because he had not a big high school career.
Right. I mean, well, you know, back then, you know, the Phoebus program wasn't, you know, a great baseball program at that time in the late 80s when he was there. They've struggled since then as well, but you know, he didn't think he even wanted to play baseball. He was thinking about going to the apprentice school and taking a trade, which is fine. But I think a coach called him and said, "Look, you might want to give baseball a try." And then, you know, to have that situation, and then 3 years later playing at Old Dominion, and then being picked the number 4 pick in the Major League Draft, which at that time was the highest pick from this area before the Upton boys came along. But I mean, 3 years prior to that, he didn't know if he was playing baseball. And now he gets drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies, and he's a number 4 pick overall.
Right. We had Woodrow Wilson in here, and Woodrow played for Hampton. Great job. Went up and played some Canadian ball. Right. Helped coach in Hampton a few times. But he was home one year lifting weights during a break in the holiday, and I think this was like during the spring. And they're out at Langley, and Dwight Stevenson comes out, and Dwight's, and they're talking about lifting weights, and Dwight says, I don't think I'm going to stay down in Alabama. He says, I think I'll either go to the service or over to the shipyard. And he says, well, why? Woodrow says, why? He said, they'd move him from center to inside linebacker, and I don't like that. And Woodrow said, go back.
And he went back, and you see what happened when he went back. The ironic story about him, he played for Coach Mike Smith at Hampton, legendary.
Legendary.
He played for Bear Bryant in Alabama.
Legendary.
And then, of course, Don Shula for the Miami Dolphins. So what did you tell him when we went to go see him?
No wonder you made the NFL Hall of Fame. You played with three of the best coaches in the world.
It's not hard to do it if you're going to play with those coaches. But he's a great guy. We had a chance to talk to him at one of the camps.
Yeah. Well, we do other things in football and basketball. We try to get them all. We got Lou Paxton in here. Lou is a world-class runner.
Right.
I mean, world-class. I'm not talking United States. I'm talking about the world. But he said the most important thing that ever happened to him was getting elected into the Runners Hall of Fame by his peers.
Right.
And to me, that says it, because there are so many good athletes in this area that they would think to
vote him in. It means a lot.
Vote him in, yeah, it means a lot.
He's respected amongst his peers. That's
all right, now Carl Francis plays ball over at Bethel, goes to college, and he goes to college with a lot of guys from this area, ends up working as a player representative to the NFL.
As an intern, I believe.
Yeah, and now he's the guy.
He's the guy. If you need something with any NFL affiliation,
and then what did he do to you?
Well, he said
he called you.
He called me, and I'm sitting there, but he's on my voicemail. I'm like, man, the guy from NFL's calling me, but he was calling about a few tapes that they wanted to use for us. I mean, we did. We'll talk about it later. The NASCAR Sports Grill. They wanted to put it on their website actually, just to show all about the camp that Tomlin had, and I just thought it was pretty shocking. He was calling us to get some stuff on the NFL website. But,
right. And then we get Jesse Kurz in here. Jess, of course, one of the best NBA officials that ever came through this area, and we were very fortunate to get him to come in here and talked a little bit about the clock and the whistles time and all. We didn't know any of that stuff. And then we're over the stadium, and my buddy Tim Cole comes in. Tim and I did the sports for the city of Hampton for 25 years, was able to sit down and talk to him. And the thing that he talked about the most was the game that Ronald Curry played in up at Virginia Union.
You called it the Mud Bowl, right?
Yeah.
I think it was 96.
I don't know what year it was, but it was a wet year.
Yeah. I remember they played Patrick Henry, and you can tell this story better than me. Rinaldi from
he was a Highland Springs head coach.
Right.
Doing radio and telling me, he says, Ronald Curry can't be that good.
Yeah.
At the end of that first quarter, 0-0.
Yeah.
And they beat him 51-0.
Exactly. It shows how great of a player he was.
And at the end of the half, Rinaldi looks over to me and says, I'm a believer.
Yeah, I mean, but gotta remember too, they called the Mud Bowl for a reason. I mean, the conditions were awful. I mean, I don't even know why they played the game. But
we couldn't find another place to play it.
Right.
There was no other place to play it but there.
But I mean, Ronald Curry's passes were just
unbelievable.
In stride and all that.
Hawkins.
Yeah, he would catch.
Ahmad Hawkins caught 2 of them.
I mean, just in stride with all the terrible weather conditions, he was still playing at a top level.
And then we had the first Vic that was ever at Tech.
See, people don't understand. That's another backstory we have here. Everybody's thinking that Mike Vick and Marcus Vick were the Vicks, the first Vicks to come out of here, but it actually was Dwight Vick, their cousin, who played at Hampton High.
Right.
And his story was he wished his mom would have had him a little earlier, a little later, because he would have been playing with either Michael Vick or Ronald Curry.
Yeah.
So he missed both of them. He missed Ronald Curry in high school, and then he missed Michael Vick at Virginia Tech.
Right.
So
he didn't get to play with either one of them.
Yeah.
But did well.
Yeah.
And then tried the NFL, and the NFL's not for everybody. You got to be the right place at the right time. And
absolutely.
They got to need your talents, that particular team. But he ends up with 2 degrees from Tech, goes back and get two masters from Liberty University, got his own business.
Yep, that's amazing.
It just goes to show you that you don't have to be so good in athletics that that's your only option.
Absolutely.
It's not your only option.
Sports can help you, absolutely, but find something else if that doesn't help out.
And then we get Herman Daniel in here. And Herman coached track at Hampton and Kickotan, basketball at both places, and was a head coach at Hampton before Brower And what I thought interesting about him is that he worked a lot of these 5-star camps.
Right.
And he had Michael Jordan when he was a kid,
Magic
had
Johnson.
Magic Johnson when he was a kid, and Howard White.
Right.
And of the three, who do you think he thought was the best?
Of course, you know who he did.
Howard
White.
Yeah.
Kickingham grad. And actually, Howard White is a good story, too, because in essence, he was the first big athlete to come from this area, 1969.
Well, he went up to your state, the house that...
Played for Lefty Driesell at University of Maryland at
Yeah.
Cole Fieldhouse. So 1969, he left here and was an All-American at Maryland, and he had a lot of injuries that prevented him playing in the NBA.
Yeah.
But he was
went
still a
on
great player.
to big things at Nike.
Yeah, he's doing better things than probably a lot of people imagine. So he's doing great up at Nike, yeah.
And then we got Dave Chubb in here. And I just want to say it in passing because Dave Chubb has been a corporate sponsor, has sponsored all our games, and has given us the Player of the Game shirt since we started it in the early 90s. And so this is, you look at what people have done for this area, and this is freebie. I mean, it doesn't cost us anything to get these Player of the Game shirts.
Absolutely. I mean, going back from when LSC and WHCS first started, you can see a Dave Chubb shirt somewhere. Player of the Game, anything.
One story on that. Scotty and I and the crew were up at Liberty University doing an all-star contest. And they introduced Mom and Dad, and they come out there, and the player gives Mom a rose. And I can't remember what player it was from Hampton, but his mom and dad both came out there with a Player of the Game T-shirt on. I said, Scotty, you got to get a shot of that. That was just awesome.
That's awesome, yeah.
Right. Dick Van Dyke
Absolutely.
did a lot with the place kickers, not just at Phoebus, but all over, and has even got long snappers scholarships. Veronica Johnson. Talk a little bit about Veronica.
I mean, she's the strength and conditioning coach. She's actually in charge now at Hampton University.
Yeah, she's the main gal.
Started out as just a volunteer at HU, I believe.
Came over, Six asked her to come over and work with his girls.
And now she's the head strength and conditioning coach at HU, which that's a great story as well.
All right. Boo Williams. Now he plays at Phoebus.
I mean, hey,
goes to St. Joe's.
St. Joe's.
Then he comes back.
AAU guru, as they call him.
Right, but see, when he first started to set this up, the guys up at 5-star camp says, well, what are you doing down in Virginia for?
They were saying there weren't any good players down here. And then he made a point and an effort to prove people wrong and say, hey, look, there's good players down here. So, and he's nationally known. All the coaches come to him for players every year.
Right. Let's talk about Big Walt. That had to be a great show. And you helped put that thing on. I mean, we're not talking sitting down and having the cameras in place.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I don't know if it was, I guess you could say it was something new. I mean, it was on location for Sportstime, but it was a great experience. You got an inside scoop of what people talk about in a barbershop setting about mostly high school sports in this area. They love LSC. They have it on every day, and they love you every time you come in there. So it was a great experience for us and them to actually have our show go out there on the road and see what they're all thinking and talking about.
And that was the first time we really left the studio. And then we went to another one. We went to the NASCAR Cafe,
NASCAR Sports Grill. We had the Tomlin Tailgate. Had about 15 interviews from top-notch athletes from this area.
And we're talking to DB and Mayo and
Tyrod Taylor, Antoine Bethea, Aaron Brooks, who played for the Saints.
Dwight Hollier.
Dwight Hollier played for the Dolphins. And everybody, they're all doing something, great. I mean, whether it's business or still playing the NFL, they're all doing great things.
Talk a little bit about Francina McElroy.
McCrory. She's one of my personal favorites because track in this area is huge, but doesn't get a lot of recognition that it should, I believe. And she's an 8-time champion at Bethel. And she has records that probably will never be broken.
Really? Now let's say they got spritz on their feet.
Something, yeah. But she was an 8-time champion at Bethel, and she was an All-American at HU, and she's going out for the Olympics in 2012 in London, and most likely she'll get that medal. So hopefully we'll cheer for her.
We're all pulling for her to do that.
Absolutely.
Roger Bouchard, 32 years at Bethel High School as a baseball coach. Great storyteller. He could tell some stories, and I thought that was really good. And one of the stories I want to talk about Vic, and I didn't get to Dwight Vick, was when they walked out on the field, Hampton High School walked out on the field in football. they intimidated other players. He said, we won a lot of games without ever snapping the ball. Until a young man by the name of Allen Iverson went over and jumped in their huddle, scared to death. And people thought he was trying to, what he was trying to do was show his teammates, hey, they're just like we are.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an interesting point, because a lot of people might have thought he was showboating or talking a lot of junk, but he was actually trying to get his team hyped to play Hampton, who at that time was one of the best teams in the state, and he was just trying to motivate his team to win.
And I think they beat him twice.
Yeah, they beat him twice that year. So another story about that is I thought it was interesting when we had Baycoat's dad in. And, you know, it was a big rivalry between Iverson and Baycoat in high school. Some said they didn't even like each other. They come to find out when he goes to Philly, they go to lunch every week in Philly. They have dinner together every week in Philly. I thought that was pretty interesting how they became friends after all the battles here in Hampton.
Oh, we got a Wall of Fame board. We get people to sign. We've got jerseys from all the Hampton schools in here. And there's a lot of people we didn't get a chance to talk to. So we're going to kind of wrap this thing up.
Absolutely.
I mean, this has been awesome, just to be able to talk about some of the guests that we've had on. And we're going to have a lot more. This is the 100th. We ain't quitting, are we?
Yeah, no, I hope not. I hope not. I hope we get 100 more. So, but it's been a great experience. Again, I just want to thank Scotty and everybody else. Once the merger came, it's like the first thing I thought about getting involved with Sportstime and LSC Sports. So it's been a great run, and hopefully we can continue it, get better, and
we're always open for suggestions, and we want to let the people know if they know somebody out here who played ball, have them call us.
Absolutely, we'll take any former athlete that we can get.
Good enough. Well, listen, I want to thank you for tuning in to LSC, and I want to thank my special guest, Ube, number one son to me. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Until next time.